let's get straight into a look at the foreign exchange market specifically. We had the kwacha continuing its downward trend in yesterday's trading session and extending some of the losses that were experienced at the start of the week. Take us through the kind of activity we're seeing on that front and what you're making of it.
Thank you very much, Alishia. I think when you look at the performance of the kwacha, it's actually important to know where it came from. I think if we go back last year, around September, just prior to the elections, the kwacha had sort of stabilized in the range of 4850, 4900. Those were essentially equilibrium levels for the kwacha. And as we moved towards the elections, the kwacha did depreciate to around the 5,000 kind of levels. But that is and was a normal thing for Zambia, as every time we have elections, we see the currency depreciating to that point. Now, interestingly, this time, the currency did not bounce back from the 5,000 levels, going back to the previous equilibrium of 4850. And we continued to see all of that up until the time that there was the introduction of statutory instrument number 33. A few weeks after the introduction of that instrument, earlier on this year, we saw the kwacha depreciating for a brief period, and then it appreciated to 4650, which was rather sudden and rather sharp. Everyone was wondering what was going on at that time. So from 4650 level, I think people started to believe that we had reached a new equilibrium. But in the weeks that followed, the kwacha started to tumble and eventually ended up at the pre-election levels of 4850. Now, that had been the equilibrium level of the kwacha for quite a while. And everyone believed that we had gone back to that original equilibrium level, and it was going to remain put around there. And that's where most of researchers were forecasting that the kwacha would close off this year. But interestingly, the kwacha started to lose some ground. Where we are now, the kwacha has depreciated. It's now trading on the interbank around 5,200. And by and large, when you look at what's been driving it, in the very recent weeks, it's essentially been demand from the energy sector. And essentially, supply and demand is dictating where the kwacha is at the moment. There's nothing extraordinary. There's just a little bit more demand than we would have, say, supply. So the kwacha is sitting around 5,200, and we're focusing that as we go towards the end of the year, the currency should remain at or just above 5,000 kwacha to the dollar.
Stanley, within what kind of macro environment? Of course, a lot of focus on the global economy, the kind of growth we're seeing on that front and slowing down. What are your forecasts for the Zambian economy moving forward? Because that in turn will affect things like monetary policy, and the decisions that get made on that front.
Well, if you look at the economic fundamentals in Zambia, they are very positive and strong. If we look at inflation, it's a single digit at about 6.6% versus a target of 7% for this year. If we look at the projected growth for this year, at one point it was 6.5%. It was then revised to 7.2%. And then very recently, in the last couple of weeks, the IMF did revise it for Zambia up to about 7.7%, which is phenomenal growth. And round about where some of the big economies in sub-Saharan Africa are performing. So when you look at those fronts, and even if you look at policy in Zambia, it hasn't really been disruptive at all. If at all there has been continuity, even post the new government coming in. With such a favorable environment, I think everything is looking up. We look at the recent budget that was presented last week, and we see that inflation target for next year is actually 6%, down from 7% this year. And there is mention of positive fundamentals, and we are really seeing them coming through now. So with regards to the growth in Zambia and the outlook, we think it remains positive. And true testimony of that as well comes in the very recent Eurobond that was issued by the country. The level of oversubscription there was so high, the highest of a maiden sovereign issue in sub-Saharan Africa ever.
Well, certainly a positive story coming through from Zambia.